Hey guys, tonight we begin with the remarkable ingenuity and let's say brutal survival skills of the Mayan people, who somehow managed to build massive cities in the middle of deadly jungles without modern tools. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, or your air conditioning if you're feeling historically dishonest. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a stone-walled room. It's hot. It smells like corn and sweat. Outside, someone's chanting. And today, you've got work to do if you want to stay alive. Welcome to the Maya civilization, around 800 AD. You're in the middle of a jungle city that's home to thousands of people, massive pyramids, and gods who demand blood to keep the world running. This isn't a vacation, this is survival. By the end of today, you'll have dodged jaguars, pleased angry gods, and hopefully avoided becoming the star of a human sacrifice ceremony. You'll work until your hands bleed, eat the same meal 3 times, and discover that even the simplest daily tasks have rules that could get you killed if you break them. The Mayans built some of the most incredible cities in human history. They could predict eclipses, created complex writing systems, and constructed pyramids that still stand today. But they also believed the gods needed human hearts to keep the sun rising. They fought constant wars to capture prisoners, and they lived in a world where making the wrong person angry could mean your heart gets cut out on top of a pyramid while thousands of people watch. You think you could handle life without modern medicine, air conditioning, or grocery stores. You think you could survive in a place where the jungle wants to eat you, the gods want your blood, and your neighbors might sell you to enemy warriors for a handful of jade. Let's find out. Because in the Maya world, every day is a test, and most people who weren't born here wouldn't make it past lunch. The sun is coming up. The workday is starting. And you're about to learn why surviving just one day as a Maya commoner might be impossible. Think you're ready? Let's see how long you last. You don't wake up because you're well rested. You wake up because the heat is already unbearable. The insects have been treating you like an all-night buffet, and someone outside is making enough noise to wake the dead. Which, given Maya beliefs about the afterlife, might actually be the point. Your bed is a woven mat on the stone floor. No mattress, no pillow, no sheets. Just you, a thin piece of reed fabric that's about as comfortable as sleeping on a welcome mat. And whatever bugs decided to join you during the night. The mat is rough, scratchy, and smells like the dozens of other people who've probably slept on it before you. It's also your only barrier between your body and a stone floor that somehow managed to retain heat from yesterday while still being uncomfortably hard. The air is thick and humid, like breathing through a wet towel that's been sitting in the sun for hours. It's not even sunrise yet, but the temperature is already climbing toward what would be considered dangerously hot by modern standards. There's no relief in sight, no air conditioning, no electric fans, no ice cubes. The only cooling system available is your own sweat, which is already working overtime. The room you're in is small, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with stone walls that seem designed to trap heat rather than provide comfort. There are no windows, just a doorway covered by a hanging cloth that does nothing to improve air circulation. The walls are thick, which is good for keeping out jaguars and enemy warriors, but terrible for keeping out the oppressive heat that builds up as the day progresses. Privacy doesn't exist here. You can hear every sound from the other families living in the surrounding rooms. Babies crying, people coughing, someone already starting to grind corn for the day's meals. An elderly man is having a loud conversation with someone about crop yields. A woman is scolding children who are apparently already awake and causing trouble. The walls are thick enough to stop arrows, but thin enough that you know exactly what your neighbors had for dinner last night. based on the digestive sounds coming through the stone. Everyone's getting up at exactly the same time. And it's not because they're all naturally early risers. It's because dawn isn't just morning in Maya culture. It's when the sun god wins his daily battle against the forces of darkness and death. If people aren't awake to witness this cosmic victory, maybe the sun won't rise tomorrow. Nobody wants to test that theory. The consequences of the sun not rising would be considerably worse than being tired. You try to sit up and immediately feel something crawling on your arm. It's about the size of a marble, has more legs than seems necessary, and appears to be in no hurry to leave. You brush it off and try not to think about what else might be living in your sleeping mat. The answer is probably a lot of things, and definitely nothing you want to know about. The heat is already oppressive, and it's going to get worse, much worse. Today's temperature will climb to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity levels that make the air feel like you're breathing through a sponge. This isn't the dry heat of a desert, where you might find some relief in the shade. This is jungle heat, thick, sticky, and inescapable. It's the kind of heat that makes you sweat just from thinking about moving. Your sleeping clothes, a simple cotton tunic and loincloth, are already sticking to your skin like a second layer of very uncomfortable skin. The fabric is rough, woven by hand from cotton that was probably grown, harvested, and processed by the same people who are now wearing it. It's practical, durable, and about as comfortable as wearing a burlap sack that's been soaked in warm water. You can smell breakfast cooking, and it's exactly what you'd expect if you've been paying attention to Maya civilization. Corn. Corn tortillas heating on stone griddles. Corn porridge bubbling in clay pots. Corn drink fermenting in ceramic jars. Everything smells like corn, because corn is pretty much the only thing most people eat. 3 times a day, every day, for their entire lives. If you're lucky, there might be some beans. If you're really lucky, maybe a little chili pepper to make the corn taste like something other than corn. Outside, you can hear the morning chanting starting. The priests are already at the temples, making sure the gods are properly honored so the world doesn't end today. The chanting will continue on and off all day, mixed with the sounds of people working, children playing, and the constant background noise of jungle life. Monkeys howling, birds calling, insects buzzing, and the occasional sound that might be a jaguar or might be someone's stomach growling. It's hard to tell the difference. You stand up and immediately feel dizzy. The humidity hits you like walking into a wall made of hot, wet air. Your vision goes a little blurry, your head feels light, and you realize that you're already dehydrated even though you've been unconscious for the past several hours. This is going to be a problem, because the day hasn't even started yet, and you're already behind on your body's water requirements. The stone floor is warm under your bare feet, having absorbed heat from the previous day, and held onto it all night, like a thermal battery designed to make your morning as uncomfortable as possible. The stones are also slightly damp, which could be from humidity, or from the various liquids that get spilled in a room where people eat, sleep, and live without the benefit of modern plumbing. Through the doorway, you can see other people starting their day. They move with the kind of efficient purpose that comes from doing the same routine every day for years. They don't look comfortable. Nobody looks comfortable in this heat. But they look adapted. They know how to move in ways that conserve energy, how to position themselves to catch any hint of breeze, how to pace themselves for a day that will be physically demanding, in conditions that would hospitalize most modern people. You, on the other hand, are already sweating, already uncomfortable, already wondering how people manage to survive in these conditions, and you haven't even left your room yet. Welcome to your first Maya morning. The sun isn't fully up, and you're already dealing with heat exhaustion, insect bites, and the growing realization that everything you thought you knew about basic comfort was wrong. This is the easy part of the day. The real challenges haven't even started yet. But if you're already struggling with the simple act of waking up, you might want to start mentally preparing yourself for what comes next. Because it's going to get hotter, harder, and more dangerous with each passing hour. Now that you're awake, sweaty, and covered in insect bites, it's time to get clean. Except clean, in Maya civilization, means something very different from what you're used to, and the process is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about basic hygiene. There's no soap. Let that sink in for a moment. No soap, no shampoo, no deodorant, no toothpaste, no mouthwash. The concept of antibacterial anything doesn't exist. The closest thing to soap is a handful of ash mixed with water. And even that's considered a luxury that most people can't afford to use regularly. Your toothbrush is a frayed stick, if you're lucky enough to have one. Most people clean their teeth by chewing on fibrous plants or rubbing them with rough cloth. The Maya knew about dental hygiene. They had to, because tooth problems could literally kill you in a world without modern medicine. But their solutions were basic and often painful. You stumble outside to find the communal washing area, which is basically a large stone basin fed by a small stream. The water is brown, warm, and has been used by dozens of other people before you. It's not exactly what you'd call clean, but it's water, and water is precious in a world where every drop has to be collected, transported, and carefully rationed. The basin is surrounded by people who are already going through their morning washing routine. They're efficient about it, quick splashes of water, vigorous scrubbing with hands or rough cloth, and then they're done. Nobody's taking long, leisurely showers. Water is too valuable, and there's too much work to be done. You cup some water in your hands and splash it on your face. It's surprisingly warm, which isn't refreshing in the already oppressive heat. The water tastes like minerals and earth, with a hint of something organic that you really don't want to think about. This is your drinking water, your washing water, and your cooking water, all in one. A woman next to you is washing her hair with what looks like a paste made from crushed plants. She works it through her long, black hair with practiced efficiency, then rinses it with careful handfuls of water. Her movements are quick and economical. She's clearly done this thousands of times. The paste smells like herbs and earth, which is probably an improvement over whatever was living in her hair before. For your own hair, you get a handful of ash mixed with water. The ash is coarse and gritty, nothing like the smooth lather of modern shampoo. It stings your scalp, burns your eyes if you're not careful, and leaves your hair feeling stripped and rough. But it does remove the grease and grime that accumulated during your night on the woven mat. So it's better than nothing. Your skin gets the same treatment. A handful of ash mixed with water, rubbed vigorously over your arms, chest, and legs. It's abrasive, like washing with very fine sandpaper, and it removes not just dirt, but probably a layer of skin as well. The ash mixture burns any cuts or insect bites, which means you're constantly wincing as you scrub. The Maya did know about certain plants that could help with cleaning. Soaproot, for example, could create a mild lather when crushed and mixed with water. But these plants were seasonal, not always available, and definitely not something you could count on for daily hygiene. Most days, it was ash, water, and elbow grease. While you're trying to figure out the ash-based cleaning system, you notice that everyone around you is checking each other's hair for lice. This isn't optional. Lice are a constant problem in a world where people live in close quarters, share clothing, and don't have access to modern pest control methods. The Maya had developed an efficient system of mutual grooming that would look familiar to anyone who's watched primates at the zoo. A young man motions for you to sit down so he can check your hair. His fingers work through your hair systematically, looking for the small, dark insects that could quickly multiply and spread to other people. He finds 3 lice, which he crushes between his fingernails with the casual efficiency of someone who's done this every day for years. The sound is small but distinct, a tiny pop that somehow manages to be both satisfying and disgusting. Now it's your turn to check someone else's hair. An elderly woman sits in front of you, and you begin the process of parting her hair and looking for lice. Her hair is coarse, grey, and hasn't been washed with anything resembling modern shampoo in her entire life. You find several lice, plus what appears to be lice eggs, which are even smaller and harder to remove. The lice removal process is time-consuming, but it's also social. People talk while they groom each other, sharing news, gossip, and information about the day's work. It's a community activity that serves multiple purposes: pest control, social bonding, and communication, all in one. Your teeth get attention next, and this is where Maya hygiene gets particularly challenging. You're handed a small stick that's been frayed at one end to create a primitive toothbrush. The stick is hard, rough, and tastes like bitter bark. You're supposed to rub it against your teeth and gums to remove food particles and plaque. The process is uncomfortable and not particularly effective. The stick is abrasive enough to irritate your gums, but not soft enough to clean effectively between your teeth. You can taste blood after a few minutes of scrubbing, which is apparently normal based on the fact that everyone else is spitting pink saliva into the dirt. Some people are using a different approach, chewing on fibrous plants that help clean teeth while providing nutrition. The plants are tough and stringy, requiring significant jaw work to break down. They taste like bitter grass and have a texture that's somewhere between celery and tree bark. But the chewing action does help remove food particles from your teeth, and the plant fibers act like natural dental floss. For your breath, you're offered a handful of herbs to chew. They taste like mint mixed with dirt and are probably effective at masking the smell of whatever you ate yesterday. But they don't address the underlying problem of bacteria in your mouth, which will continue to multiply throughout the day. The Maya also knew about certain plants that could help with body odor, but these were typically reserved for special occasions or people of higher social status. Most people simply accepted that they would smell like sweat, smoke, and whatever they'd been working with during the day. Personal hygiene items that you take for granted, razors, combs, nail clippers, either don't exist or are made from materials that barely function. Men pluck facial hair with tweezers made from thorns or small bones. Women use similar tools to shape their eyebrows and remove unwanted hair. The process is time-consuming, painful, and not particularly effective. Your fingernails are trimmed with a sharp stone or piece of obsidian. The Maya were skilled at working with obsidian, which can be sharper than modern steel, but using it for personal grooming requires steady hands and considerable courage. One wrong move, and you could cut yourself badly enough to cause serious bleeding. By the time you've finished your morning hygiene routine, you're cleaner than you were when you woke up, but you're also sore, tired, and keenly aware of how many things you usually take for granted. Your scalp stings from the ash. Your gums are bleeding from the stick brushing, and your skin feels raw from the aggressive scrubbing. You also smell like ash, herbs, and sweat, which is apparently the best you can hope for in a world without modern cleaning products. The other people around you seem satisfied with their cleaning routine and are already moving on to the next part of their day. They don't look particularly clean by modern standards, but they look functional and ready for work. You, on the other hand, are already questioning whether you have what it takes to survive in a world where basic hygiene is this challenging and time-consuming. And you haven't even had breakfast yet. Time for breakfast, and you're about to discover that Maya cuisine has all the variety of a broken record player. The main course is corn. The side dish is corn. The drink is corn. And if you're really lucky, there might be some corn for dessert. Welcome to the Maya diet, where culinary diversity means choosing between different ways to prepare the same grain that your ancestors have been eating for over 1,000 years. If you were hoping for bacon and eggs, or even just some variety in your morning meal, you're about to be very disappointed. The cooking area is a collection of stone hearths, with clay pots bubbling over small fires. The smoke from these fires fills the air with a haze that makes your eyes water and your throat burn. There's no ventilation system, no exhaust fans, just smoke finding its way out through doorways and cracks in the walls. The Maya have been cooking this way for centuries, so they're used to it. You're not. A woman hands you a clay bowl filled with what looks like thick, beige porridge. This is a tole, a corn-based drink that's been ground, mixed with water, and heated until it reaches the consistency of thin oatmeal. It's warm, which is the last thing you want in the already oppressive heat, and it tastes like liquid corn with a hint of ash from the cooking fire. You take a sip and immediately understand why the Maya added chili peppers to everything they could. The atole is bland, starchy, and has a texture that's somewhere between soup and glue. It's filling, which is the point, but it's not what anyone would call flavorful. The corn has been processed to remove the hull, but it still has a grainy texture that gets stuck in your teeth. Next comes your solid food, corn tortillas. These are flat, round discs of masa that have been pressed by hand and cooked on a stone griddle. The tortillas are still warm from the cooking surface, which is nice, but they're also dry, dense, and taste like corn that's been filtered through a grinding stone, which is exactly what they are. The tortillas are served with a small bowl of what appears to be black paste. This is black beans that have been cooked, mashed, and seasoned with salt and chili peppers. The beans are the most flavorful thing you've encountered so far, but they're also surprisingly spicy. The Maya didn't mess around with their chili peppers. A small amount goes a long way, and too much will leave you gasping for water that you can't afford to waste. You watch the other people eating and notice that they're incredibly efficient with their food. Nothing gets wasted. Every grain of corn, every drop of atole, every crumb of tortilla is consumed. In a world where food scarcity is a constant concern, waste isn't just discouraged, it's unthinkable. The Maya understood nutrition better than you might expect. Corn and beans together provide a complete protein, which is why this combination appears in so many Mesoamerican cultures. The problem is that this nutritional knowledge came from generations of trial and error, not from any understanding of vitamins or minerals. People got sick from nutritional deficiencies, but they didn't always know why. If you're a commoner, this is pretty much your entire meal: corn, beans, and water. Maybe some chili peppers if you're lucky. Maybe some herbs if someone in your family knows which plants are edible and which ones will kill you. The Maya had extensive knowledge of jungle plants, but using that knowledge required years of training and experience that you don't have. If you're nobility, or if this is a special occasion, you might get some additional options. There could be chocolate, but not the sweet chocolate you're thinking of. Maya chocolate was bitter, often mixed with chili peppers, and served as a drink that was both ceremonial and practical. It was considered food of the gods, which meant it was reserved for people who could afford to eat like gods. The chocolate drink is thick, frothy, and has a complex flavor that's unlike anything you've ever tasted. It's bitter, spicy, and has an earthy undertone that comes from the cacao beans being roasted over an open fire. Some people add honey to sweeten it, but honey is expensive and not always available. Most people drink their chocolate straight, bitter, and intense. You might also get some meat if you're very lucky or very important. But meat is rare and expensive. The Maya domesticated turkeys and dogs for food, but these animals were typically reserved for special occasions or for people of high social status. Most people got their protein from beans, insects, and whatever small animals they could catch in the jungle. The insects are actually more nutritious than you might think. Certain types of beetles, ants, and grubs are high in protein and fat. but they're also crunchy, slimy, or both, and they taste like whatever they've been eating. If you're squeamish about insects, you're going to have a hard time getting adequate nutrition in Maya society. Fish is available if you live near water, but preserving fish without refrigeration is challenging. The Maya developed techniques for smoking and drying fish, but these methods require time, skill, and resources that not everyone has access to. Fresh fish is a luxury that most people can't afford regularly. Salt is another luxury item. The Maya had access to salt from coastal areas, but transporting it inland was expensive and time-consuming. Most people used very little salt, which means their food was often bland by modern standards. They compensated with chili peppers, herbs, and other seasonings, but the overall flavor profile was quite different from what you're used to. Water is served in clay cups that are rough, unglazed, and slightly porous. The water tastes like minerals and earth, because that's essentially what it is. It's been collected from streams, stored in clay vessels, and has probably been sitting around long enough to develop its own ecosystem of microorganisms. This is your drinking water, and it's the best you're going to get. The Maya knew about fermentation, and they made several types of alcoholic beverages from corn and other plants. But these drinks were typically reserved for ceremonies and special occasions. For everyday hydration, you get water that tastes like it came from a puddle, because it might have. As you eat your breakfast, you notice that everyone around you is eating quickly and efficiently. They don't linger over their food, they don't chat extensively during meals, and they don't seem to enjoy the process of eating. Food is fuel, not entertainment. It's something you consume to have energy for work, not something you savor for pleasure. You also notice that portions are small. The Maya understood that food was precious, and they ate just enough to maintain their energy levels. There's no such thing as eating until you're full. No concept of seconds or thirds. You eat what you're given, and then you go to work. The cooking process itself is labor-intensive and time-consuming. The corn has to be ground by hand using stone tools. The tortillas have to be pressed and cooked individually. The beans have to be sorted, cleaned, and cooked slowly over a fire that has to be maintained constantly. Preparing even a simple meal requires hours of work by multiple people. By the time you finish your breakfast, you're still hungry, but you're also beginning to understand why Maya society was organized around food production. When every meal requires this much effort to prepare, and when the ingredients are this limited, food becomes the central focus of daily life. Your stomach is partially full of corn-based products that are nutritious, but not particularly satisfying. Your mouth tastes like chili peppers and smoke. Your throat is dry from the spicy food and the smoky air. You're ready for more food, but you're not going to get it for several hours. This is Maya breakfast. Tomorrow, it will be exactly the same. And the day after that. And every day for the rest of your life, assuming you survive that long. The Maya created one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas. But they did it while eating the same basic meal every day for over 1,000 years. You're beginning to understand that surviving in Maya society isn't just about avoiding jaguars and human sacrifice. It's also about accepting that life is going to be repetitive, challenging, and focused on the basic necessities of existence. And you haven't even started your real work yet. Now that you've finished your corn-based breakfast, it's time to get dressed. And this is where you're going to discover that Maya fashion isn't just about looking good. It's about survival, social status, and avoiding the kind of cultural mistakes that could get you killed. In Maya society, what you wear tells everyone exactly who you are, where you fit in the social hierarchy, and whether you deserve to live or die. Get it wrong, and you'll be marked as an outsider, a spy, or someone who doesn't understand the rules. None of these categories have high survival rates. The first thing you need to understand is that Maya clothing is all about the details. It's not just about covering your body. It's about communicating your social position, your wealth, your occupation, and your relationship with the gods. Every piece of fabric, every decorative element, every color has meaning that everyone else understands instinctively. You, however, understand none of it. Your basic outfit consists of a cotton loincloth and a simple tunic. The cotton is rough, hand-woven, and has the texture of canvas that's been soaked in water and then dried in the sun. It's practical, durable, and about as comfortable as wearing a burlap sack. The cotton is also undyed, which immediately marks you as either very poor or very foreign. The loincloth is a long strip of cotton that wraps around your waist and between your legs. It's held in place by a belt made from woven plant fibers, and it takes some practice to get it positioned correctly. Too loose, and it falls off. Too tight, and it cuts off circulation. The Maya have been wearing these since childhood, so they know exactly how to adjust them. You don't. The tunic is a simple, rectangular piece of cloth with holes for your head and arms. It hangs to about mid-thigh and is designed for practicality rather than fashion. There are no buttons, no zippers, no closures of any kind. It's just a piece of cloth that you wear over your loincloth to provide additional coverage and protection from the sun. But here's where things get complicated. The weave pattern of your cloth tells everyone your social status. Common people wear cloth with simple, basic weaves. Nobility wear cloth with complex patterns that require skilled weavers and expensive materials. The difference is subtle to outsiders, but obvious to anyone who grew up in Maya society. Your simple cotton tunic immediately identifies you as a commoner, maybe a very poor commoner. The lack of decoration, the basic weave, and the rough texture all scream low status to anyone who looks at you. This is actually good news in some ways. Nobody expects much from poor commoners, so you're less likely to be singled out for challenging responsibilities. But it's also bad news, because poor commoners are expendable. They're the first to be sacrificed during religious ceremonies, the first to be sent into dangerous situations, and the first to be blamed when things go wrong. Your clothes are essentially announcing to the world that your life has very little value. The Maya used several different fibers for clothing, but cotton was the most common. They also used fibers from agave plants, which produced a rougher, more durable fabric. Agave fiber clothing was typically worn by workers who needed something that could withstand heavy labor, but it was also itchy, uncomfortable, and marked you as someone who did manual labor for a living. Color is another major status indicator. The Maya had access to several natural dyes, but the bright, vibrant colors required expensive materials and skilled dyers. Red dye came from cochineal insects, which were labor-intensive to harvest and process. Blue dye came from indigo plants, which required specific growing conditions and complex processing techniques. Your undyed cotton immediately marks you as someone who can't afford colored cloth. Everyone around you is wearing clothing with at least some color. A red stripe here, a blue border there, maybe some yellow decorative elements. You look like someone who either can't afford dye or doesn't understand its importance. The Maya also used feathers extensively in their clothing, but feathers were serious business. Different types of feathers indicated different social positions and had different spiritual significance. Quetzal feathers were the most prized, reserved for the highest nobility and most important religious ceremonies. Wearing the wrong feathers could be interpreted as claiming a social position you didn't have, which was a form of fraud that could result in severe punishment. You don't have any feathers on your clothing, which is probably good. Better to be obviously low status than to accidentally claim a rank you're not entitled to. The Maya took these distinctions very seriously, and mistakes could be fatal. Jewelry is another crucial element of Maya dress, and it's where the social divisions become most obvious. Common people might wear simple ornaments made from shells, stones, or carved bone. Nobility wear elaborate pieces made from jade, gold and precious stones that have been crafted by master artisans. Jade was particularly important in Maya culture. It was more valuable than gold and was associated with life, fertility, and divine power. The quality, size, and placement of jade jewelry told everyone exactly where you stood in the social hierarchy. A large jade pendant marked you as nobility. A small jade bead marked you as someone with modest wealth. No jade at all marked you as a commoner. You're wearing no jewelry at all, which is probably the safest option. Wearing fake jewelry or jewelry that doesn't match your social status could get you in serious trouble. The Maya were experts at working with precious materials, and they could easily spot inferior imitations. Your hair is another crucial element of your appearance. The Maya had elaborate hairstyles that indicated social status, age, marital status, and occupation. Common people typically wore their hair in simple styles that were practical for work. Nobility wore complex arrangements that required hours of preparation and skilled assistance. The Maya also practiced cranial modification, artificially shaping the skulls of infants to create elongated heads that were considered beautiful and prestigious. If you have a normal, unmodified skull, you're immediately marked as either a foreigner or someone from a family too poor to afford proper cranial shaping. Your teeth are another giveaway. The Maya practiced dental modification, filing teeth into points and inlaying them with jade or other precious materials. These modifications were both decorative and spiritual. They were thought to make the teeth more pleasing to the gods and more intimidating to enemies. Your unmodified teeth immediately mark you as an outsider. Everyone around you has teeth that have been shaped, filed, or decorated. Your plain, natural teeth look primitive and uncultured by Maya standards. Footwear is relatively simple in Maya society. Most people go barefoot most of the time, but sandals are worn for special occasions or by people of higher status. The sandals are made from woven plant fibers or leather, and they're designed for durability rather than comfort. Your bare feet are actually appropriate for your apparent social status. Common people don't wear sandals for everyday activities, but your feet are also soft and unprepared for walking on rough stone surfaces, jungle paths, and hot ground. The Maya have been walking barefoot since childhood, so their feet are tough and calloused. Yours are not. The Maya also used body paint and tattoos as part of their daily dress. Different colors and patterns had different meanings, and the quality of the paint and the skill of the application indicated social status. Common people might use simple designs drawn with basic pigments. Nobility employed skilled artists to create elaborate body art using expensive materials. You have no body paint or tattoos, which again marks you as either very poor or very foreign. Everyone around you has at least some decorative body art. Simple geometric patterns, animal designs, or religious symbols. Your unmarked skin makes you stand out in ways that are probably not good for your survival. By the time you're fully dressed, you look like exactly what you are. A poor, low-status commoner who doesn't really understand the rules of Maya society. Your simple cotton clothing, lack of jewelry, unmodified teeth, and unmarked skin all combine to create an image of someone who has very little value and very few rights. This is both good and bad. Good because nobody expects much from you, and you're less likely to be given impossible responsibilities. Bad because you're expendable, and expendable people don't tend to live very long in Maya society. You're dressed like a local, but you're dressed like a local who's at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Everyone you meet will know immediately that you're not important, not wealthy, and probably not worth their time or attention. The Maya created one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas, but they did it with a rigid social structure that was immediately visible in how people dressed. Your clothing is announcing to the world that you're not part of the elite. And in Maya society, That's a dangerous position to be in. And you haven't even started your workday yet. Now that you're dressed like a poor commoner, it's time to start working like one. And this is where you're going to discover that Maya society has zero tolerance for incompetence, weakness, or the learning curve that comes with being new to backbreaking physical labor in deadly jungle conditions. The work assignments are handed out at dawn by supervisors who have the authority to decide whether you live or die based on your performance. There's no employee handbook, no safety training, no gradual introduction to your responsibilities. You're expected to work at the same level as people who've been doing these jobs since childhood. And failure isn't just embarrassing, it's potentially fatal. If you're assigned to farming, you're about to learn why Maya agriculture was both incredibly sophisticated and incredibly brutal. The Maya developed complex systems for growing crops in jungle conditions, but implementing these systems requires knowledge, skill, and physical endurance that take years to develop. Your first task is slash and burn clearing, which sounds simple until you try to do it in 100-degree heat with humidity that makes the air feel like soup. You're handed a stone axe that weighs about 10 pounds and has an edge that's sharp enough to cut through small trees, but dull enough to require enormous force to be effective. The axe handle is rough wood that immediately starts giving you blisters. The stone head is tied to the handle with plant fibers that seem ready to break at any moment. This is your primary tool for clearing jungle that's been growing undisturbed for years. The trees are dense, the undergrowth is thick, and everything is wet, green, and determined to stay exactly where it is. You swing the axe at a small tree and immediately understand why Maya farmers were incredibly strong. The tree barely budges. Your shoulders ache, your back screams, and your hands are already bleeding from the rough handle. The Maya farmer working next to you cuts down the same size tree with 3 efficient swings. You've been hacking at yours for 10 minutes and haven't even made it halfway through. The jungle doesn't want to be cleared. Every plant seems designed to resist human efforts to remove it. Vines wrap around your axe. Thorns tear at your clothes and skin, and the thick canopy above blocks out most of the sunlight, while trapping the heat and humidity at ground level. It's like working inside a green, living oven that's actively trying to kill you. The Maya developed specific techniques for jungle clearing that maximize efficiency while minimizing energy expenditure. They knew which trees to cut first, which direction to fell them, and how to use the natural growth patterns of the jungle to their advantage. You know none of this. You're just swinging an axe randomly and hoping something productive happens. After an hour of work, you've cleared maybe 10 square feet of jungle. The Maya farmer next to you has cleared an area the size of a basketball court. He's sweating, but he's not exhausted. He's working at a pace he can maintain all day. You're already on the verge of heat exhaustion, and the sun isn't even fully up yet. The cleared vegetation has to be piled up and burned, which presents its own set of challenges. The Maya knew how to create fires that would burn efficiently without getting out of control. They understood wind patterns, soil conditions, and the moisture content of different types of vegetation. You understand none of this. Your pile of cleared vegetation is too wet to burn properly, creating thick smoke that makes your eyes water and your throat burn. The Maya farmer's pile burns cleanly and efficiently, creating ash that will fertilize the soil for planting. Your pile just smolders and produces smoke that attracts insects and makes everyone nearby cough. If you're assigned to scribal work, you're facing a different but equally challenging set of problems. Maya writing was incredibly complex, combining logographic and syllabic elements in ways that required years of training to master. The scribes started learning as children and spent decades perfecting their skills. You're handed a piece of bark paper and a brush made from animal hair. The paper is rough, handmade, and expensive. If you ruin it, you'll be expected to pay for it, which is impossible since you don't have any money. The brush is delicate, designed for precise work, and completely unlike any writing implement you've ever used. The Maya writing system includes hundreds of different glyphs, each with multiple possible meanings depending on context. The glyphs can be read in different directions, combined in complex ways, and modified with additional elements that change their meaning. A single mistake in copying can completely alter the meaning of an important text. Your first assignment is to copy a simple calendar calculation. The Maya calendar was incredibly sophisticated, tracking multiple cycles simultaneously and requiring precise mathematical calculations. The scribe next to you copies the glyphs quickly and accurately, his hand moving with the confidence that comes from years of practice. You can barely hold the brush correctly, let alone create recognizable glyphs. Your lines are shaky, your proportions are wrong, and you keep making ink blots that ruin the expensive paper. The supervisor watches you work with growing impatience, and you can see him calculating whether you're worth the cost of the materials you're wasting. Maya mathematics was based on a vigesimal system, base 20, that included the concept of zero, which was actually quite advanced for its time. But understanding the mathematical concepts isn't the same as being able to execute the complex calculations required for calendar work, astronomical observations, and architectural planning. The pressure to perform perfectly is constant and overwhelming. In Maya society, mistakes in important work weren't just embarrassing, they were potentially catastrophic. A mistake in calendar calculations could throw off religious ceremonies. A mistake in architectural planning could cause buildings to collapse. A mistake in astronomical observations could interfere with agricultural timing. The Maya believed that precision in human work was necessary to maintain cosmic order. If people didn't do their jobs correctly, the gods might withdraw their support, causing disasters like droughts, floods, or military defeats. This meant that every task, no matter how small, carried the weight of cosmic responsibility. You're not just failing at your assigned work, you're potentially endangering the entire community through your incompetence. The Maya took this very seriously, and they had harsh punishments for people who couldn't meet the standards required for their jobs. The physical demands of Maya work are unlike anything you've experienced. The heat is oppressive, the humidity is overwhelming, and there's no air conditioning, no electric fans, no relief from the conditions. You're expected to work at full capacity for hours at a time without modern conveniences like water breaks, lunch breaks, or safety equipment. The Maya had developed techniques for working in these conditions, but these techniques required conditioning that took years to develop. They knew how to pace themselves, how to conserve energy, and how to recognize the signs of heat exhaustion before it became dangerous. You don't. Your work clothes are already soaked with sweat. Your skin is burning from sun exposure, and your muscles are cramping from dehydration. The Maya workers around you are also sweating, but they're not suffering the way you are. They've adapted to these conditions through a lifetime of exposure. The tools you're using are all handmade, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The stone axe is heavy and awkward. The brush is delicate and unfamiliar. Everything requires techniques that take time to learn, but you're expected to perform at professional levels immediately. The Maya also worked with a sense of urgency that came from understanding the consequences of failure. Agricultural work had to be completed according to seasonal timing that was determined by astronomical observations. Scribal work had to be completed according to ceremonial schedules that were tied to religious calendar cycles. There was no flexibility, no extensions, no second chances. By mid-morning, you're already falling behind schedule. The Maya workers around you are making steady progress on their assigned tasks while you're struggling with the basics. Your supervisor is watching you with growing concern, and you can see him starting to question whether you're worth the resources being invested in your training. The Maya had a saying that translated roughly to, "The gods help those who work correctly." This wasn't just a motivational slogan. It was a fundamental belief that human competence was necessary for divine favor. If you couldn't do your job properly, you were potentially interfering with the relationship between the human and divine worlds. Your failure isn't just personal, it's cosmic. And in Maya society, cosmic failures had consequences that went far beyond getting fired or receiving a bad performance review. You're not just failing at your morning tasks. You're failing at being a productive member of Maya society. And that's a type of failure that the Maya didn't tolerate for very long. The morning work period is supposed to last until midday, but you're already exhausted, injured, and falling behind. The Maya workers around you show no signs of slowing down, and the supervisors show no signs of sympathy for your struggles. You're beginning to understand that surviving in Maya society isn't just about avoiding obvious dangers like jaguars and human sacrifice. It's also about meeting performance standards that were designed for people who'd been preparing for these jobs their entire lives. And you're not even close to meeting those standards. You thought the back-breaking physical labor was hard. Well, now you're about to discover that in Maya society, everything you do, from the way you light a fire to the direction you spit, is being judged by gods who are apparently very picky about proper technique and extremely unforgiving about mistakes. The Maya didn't just believe in gods. They believed in gods who were actively involved in every aspect of daily life, constantly monitoring human behavior and ready to unleash cosmic punishment for even minor infractions. Every action you take has religious significance, and since you don't know the rules, you're about to commit sacrilege approximately every 5 minutes. Your first mistake happens when you try to light a fire to heat some water. Seems simple, right? Wrong. Fire lighting in Maya society is a sacred act that requires proper prayers, correct positioning, and specific techniques that honor the fire god. You just grab some dry wood and start trying to create sparks with stones. The Maya farmer next to you immediately stops what he's doing and stares at you with horror. You're lighting the fire from the wrong direction. You haven't said the proper prayers. You haven't positioned the wood according to the cardinal directions. You're basically insulting the fire god, and insulting gods in Maya society is a fast track to disaster. He quickly intervenes, muttering what are probably prayers for forgiveness while repositioning your fire materials. The wood has to be arranged in a specific pattern that represents the 4 directions of the universe. The first flame has to be lit from the east, where the sun rises. Prayers have to be said, thanking the fire god for providing warmth and light. You watch him go through the elaborate ritual and realize that even something as basic as making fire requires religious knowledge that you don't have. The Maya saw spiritual significance in everything, and they had developed complex protocols for interacting with the divine world through everyday activities. Next, you're assigned to help with planting corn, which should be straightforward agricultural work. But in Maya society, corn isn't just a crop. It's a sacred substance that the gods use to create human beings. Planting corn is a religious ceremony that requires proper prayers, correct timing, and specific techniques that honor the corn god. The planting has to be done according to the Maya calendar, which tracks multiple cycles simultaneously. The ritual calendar determines which days are appropriate for planting, which days are unlucky, and which days would anger the gods. You have no idea what day it is according to the Maya calendar, let alone whether it's a good day for planting. The corn seeds have to be blessed before planting. Each seed is held up to the 4 directions, while prayers are said, asking the gods to make it grow strong and healthy. The holes for the seeds have to be dug to specific depths that correspond to sacred measurements. The spacing between plants has to follow patterns that represent cosmic order. You just start digging holes randomly and dropping seeds in them. The Maya farmers around you stop working and stare at you like you've just committed murder. One of them actually falls to his knees and starts praying, probably asking the corn god not to punish the entire community for your ignorance. The supervisor comes over and explains, with barely controlled panic, that you've potentially cursed the entire harvest. The corn god is notoriously sensitive about proper planting procedures, and mistakes in the planting ceremony can result in crop failures that could starve the entire city. Your casual approach to seed placement might have doomed thousands of people to famine. You're quickly moved to a different task, but the damage is done. Word spreads that you've insulted the corn god, and people start giving you nervous looks. In Maya society, someone who angers the gods is dangerous to be around. Divine punishment doesn't always target just the guilty party. Sometimes entire communities suffer for the mistakes of individuals. Your next assignment is to help carry water from the sacred cenote, which is a natural limestone sinkhole that the Maya considered a portal to the underworld. The water from cenotes is especially sacred because it comes from the realm of the gods. Carrying this water requires specific prayers, proper behavior, and absolute respect for the spiritual significance of the task. You're given a large clay jar and told to be very careful not to spill any water. The Maya believe that wasting sacred water is an insult to the rain god, who controls the life-giving rains that make agriculture possible. The rain god is particularly important in Maya society because drought can destroy entire civilizations. The path to the cenote is treacherous, winding through jungle terrain that's slippery, uneven, and full of obstacles. The Maya water carriers navigate this path with practiced ease, balancing their heavy jars while maintaining the slow, respectful pace that's appropriate for sacred work. You're struggling just to stay upright. Halfway to the cenote, you trip over a root and spill about a quarter of your water. The Maya carriers around you immediately stop and stare at you with a mixture of horror and fear. You've just wasted sacred water, which is a serious offense against the rain god. In a society where water scarcity is a constant threat, this kind of waste is both practically and spiritually dangerous. One of the carriers starts praying immediately, asking the rain god to forgive the waste and not to punish the community with drought. Others begin making signs against evil, trying to protect themselves from any divine anger that might be directed their way. You're beginning to understand that your mistakes don't just affect you. They potentially endanger everyone around you. At the cenote itself, you discover that drawing water is also a religious ceremony. The Maya believe that cenotes are inhabited by powerful spirits who control access to the water. These spirits must be properly honored, or they might refuse to provide water, or might contaminate it with supernatural poisons. The water drawing ceremony involves specific prayers, offerings of corn and incense, and careful procedures for lowering the jars into the water. The jars have to be lowered from specific positions around the cenote edge. The person drawing water has to maintain proper posture and say the correct prayers. Even the rope used to lower the jars has to be blessed. You watch the ceremony with growing anxiety, realizing that every step is loaded with spiritual significance that you don't understand. The Maya carriers perform each action with the kind of careful attention that comes from knowing that mistakes can have cosmic consequences. When it's your turn to draw water, you do your best to copy what you've seen, but you're clearly not doing it right. The prayers you attempt to repeat are probably nonsensical. Your posture is wrong. You're moving too fast, without the proper reverence for the sacred nature of the task. The water spirits apparently notice your incompetence, because the rope breaks while you're lowering your jar. The jar falls into the cenote and disappears into the dark water below. This is a disaster on multiple levels. You've lost an expensive piece of pottery, wasted the opportunity to collect sacred water, and potentially offended the cenote spirits. The Maya carriers immediately begin damage control, offering extra prayers and additional corn offerings to appease the spirits. They explain to the cenote that you're obviously ignorant and foreign, not intentionally disrespectful. They ask the spirits to be patient with your incompetence, and not to punish the community for your mistakes. You're quickly removed from water-carrying duty and assigned to something that seems safer, sweeping the courtyard around a small temple. But even sweeping has religious significance in Maya society. The temple courtyards are sacred spaces that require proper cleaning techniques and appropriate prayers. The broom you're given is made from bound plant fibers, and it's designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The sweeping has to be done in specific patterns that represent cosmic order. You're supposed to sweep from the center outward, representing the movement of divine energy from the sacred center to the mundane world. You just start sweeping randomly, trying to collect the debris as efficiently as possible. But you're sweeping in the wrong direction, creating patterns that represent chaos rather than order. The Maya temple attendants quickly intervene, explaining that improper sweeping can disturb the spiritual balance of the sacred space. The debris you collect can't just be thrown away randomly. Different types of debris have different spiritual significance and have to be disposed of in specific ways. Leaves that have fallen from sacred trees have to be composted in designated areas. Dust from the temple's stones has to be scattered in patterns that honor the building spirits. You're beginning to understand that there's no such thing as secular work in Maya society. Everything has religious significance. Everything requires proper technique, and everything can potentially anger the gods if done incorrectly. The Maya lived in a world where the spiritual and physical realms were completely integrated, and ignorance of religious protocols was extremely dangerous. The constant pressure to perform every task correctly is overwhelming. The Maya workers around you navigate these complex requirements automatically because they've been learning them since childhood. They know which prayers to say, which directions to face, which procedures to follow for every possible situation. You don't know any of this, and your ignorance is becoming increasingly obvious to everyone around you. People are starting to avoid you, not because they dislike you personally, but because association with someone who consistently angers the gods is dangerous. Divine punishment often affects entire communities, not just individuals. By midday, you've managed to offend at least 3 different gods, waste sacred materials, and potentially curse several important activities. The Maya workers around you are nervous, the supervisors are concerned, and you're beginning to understand that your cultural ignorance might be just as dangerous as any physical threat you might face. The gods are indeed watching, and they're apparently not impressed with your performance. In Maya society, that's a problem that goes far beyond simple job dissatisfaction. It's a problem that could get you killed, and not just by human authorities. The Maya believed that people who consistently angered the gods were dangerous to the entire community and had to be removed to prevent cosmic disasters. Your mourning of religious mistakes might have just put you on a very short list of people who need to be dealt with before they cause any more problems. And you still don't understand most of the rules you're supposed to be following. Just when you think you've learned the basic rules of Maya society, you're about to discover that the gods don't just want your respect, your prayers, and your careful attention to ritual details. They want your blood, and they want it fresh, voluntarily given, and offered with the kind of religious enthusiasm that suggests you're genuinely happy to be bleeding for cosmic purposes. The bloodletting ceremony begins without warning. One moment, you're trying to figure out the proper way to arrange corn offerings, and the next moment, a priest is approaching with a collection of thorns, obsidian blades, and stingray spines that are clearly designed for piercing human flesh in religiously significant ways. This isn't optional. In Maya society, bloodletting is a regular religious obligation that demonstrates your commitment to the gods and your willingness to sacrifice for the good of the community. Everyone participates, from the king down to the lowest commoner. The only difference is in the amount of blood offered and the body parts that are used for the offering. The priest explains the procedure with the kind of matter-of-fact tone that suggests he's done this thousands of times. The gods require blood to maintain their strength, and continue their work of keeping the universe functioning properly. Without regular blood offerings, the gods might weaken, die, or simply lose interest in protecting human civilization. You're handed a maguey thorn that's been sharpened to a fine point. The thorn is about 3 inches long, harder than steel, and designed by nature to penetrate skin with maximum efficiency. The Maya discovered that maguey thorns were perfect for bloodletting because they were sharp enough to pierce flesh easily, but too large to accidentally cause fatal wounds. The priest demonstrates the proper technique on his own arm, pushing the thorn through a fold of skin and drawing it out slowly to maximize bleeding. Blood runs down his arm in a steady stream, which he collects in a small clay bowl. He shows no signs of pain, discomfort, or concern about the wound he's just created. Now it's your turn. You look at the thorn in your hand and try to work up the courage to push it through your own skin. The Maya people around you are watching with expectant faces, waiting to see if you'll demonstrate proper religious devotion or reveal yourself as someone who's not willing to sacrifice for the gods. The pressure is enormous. Refusing to participate in bloodletting would mark you as someone who's either cowardly, impious, or foreign. All of these categories are dangerous in Maya society. People who won't bleed for the gods are considered unreliable, potentially traitorous, and definitely not worth protecting when dangerous situations arise. You push the thorn against your forearm and immediately understand why this is considered a significant sacrifice. The thorn is sharp, but it still requires considerable force to push through skin. The pain is immediate, intense, and completely unlike anything you've experienced before. It's not just the physical sensation of being stabbed. It's the psychological impact of deliberately injuring yourself for religious purposes. The blood flows surprisingly freely once the thorn penetrates your skin. The Maya priest nods approvingly and hands you a small bowl to collect the blood. The blood is bright red, warm, and flows in a steady stream that's both fascinating and disturbing to watch. This is your blood, leaving your body, offered to gods who may or may not exist. But the simple arm piercing is just the beginning. The priest explains that different occasions require different types of blood offerings. For more important ceremonies, blood has to be drawn from more significant body parts. The king, for example, regularly pierces his tongue to communicate with the gods. Nobles draw blood from their genitals to demonstrate their willingness to sacrifice their capacity for reproduction. You try not to think about what body parts you might be expected to pierce if you were to participate in more important ceremonies. The Maya took bloodletting very seriously, and they developed increasingly elaborate techniques for extracting blood from various parts of the human body. Some of these techniques required considerable courage, pain tolerance, and commitment to religious principles. The blood you've collected is mixed with copal incense and offered to the gods by burning it in a special ceremonial brazier. The smoke from burning blood and incense is supposed to carry prayers directly to the divine realm, where the gods can absorb the life force contained in the blood and use it to maintain cosmic order. The ceremony is conducted with the kind of solemn reverence that suggests this is one of the most important activities in Maya society. The priest speaks prayers in ancient Maya language that you don't understand, but the tone is respectful, grateful, and slightly fearful. The gods are being honored, but they're also being appeased, suggesting that they might be dangerous if not properly satisfied. You watch the smoke from your blood rise toward the sky and try to feel the kind of spiritual connection that the Maya obviously experienced during these ceremonies. The blood offering is supposed to create a direct link between the human and divine worlds, allowing communication, requesting divine favor, and demonstrating human devotion to cosmic order. But mostly, you just feel pain, nausea, and a growing understanding that Maya religion is much more demanding than you had anticipated. The gods don't just want worship, they want sacrifice that involves real cost, real pain, and real commitment. The bloodletting ceremony is designed to ensure that religious devotion isn't just theoretical, but involves genuine personal sacrifice. The Maya believed that the gods had sacrificed their own blood to create human beings, so humans were obligated to return the favor by offering their blood to sustain the gods. This wasn't just gratitude, it was a cosmic transaction that maintained the balance between the human and divine worlds. Your arm is still bleeding, and the priest shows you how to bind the wound with clean cloth to prevent infection. The Maya understood that bloodletting carried medical risks, and they developed techniques for minimizing these risks while still extracting the blood required for religious purposes. The wound will heal, but it will leave a scar that will mark you as someone who has participated in Maya bloodletting ceremonies. These scars are considered honorable, proof that you've demonstrated proper religious devotion and willingness to sacrifice for the gods. People with many bloodletting scars are respected as particularly pious and committed to cosmic order. But the bloodletting isn't finished yet. The priest explains that blood offerings have to be made regularly, not just during special ceremonies. The gods need constant nourishment to maintain their strength and continue their work of keeping the universe functioning properly. This means that bloodletting is a recurring obligation, not a one-time demonstration of religious commitment. You're expected to participate in bloodletting ceremonies at least once a week, and more often during important religious festivals. The Maya calendar includes numerous occasions that require blood offerings, and missing these obligations would be interpreted as religious negligence that could anger the gods and endanger the community. The Maya also believed that the quality of the blood offering mattered. Blood that was given reluctantly or with insufficient reverence was less valuable to the gods than blood that was offered with genuine devotion and proper ritual preparation. This meant that you couldn't just go through the motions. You had to demonstrate sincere religious commitment. As you leave the bloodletting ceremony, you're nursing a painful wound, trying to process the psychological impact of deliberately injuring yourself for religious purposes, and beginning to understand that Maya spirituality is much more demanding than you had anticipated. The Maya built one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas, but they did it while believing that the gods required regular blood sacrifice to maintain cosmic order. This wasn't primitive superstition. It was a complex theological system that integrated religious belief with practical governance, social organization, and individual behavior. Your bloodletting ceremony is complete, but it's just the beginning of your education in Maya religious practices. The gods have tasted your blood, and they'll expect more. Regular offerings, proper devotion, and increasing levels of sacrifice as you become more integrated into Maya society. The Maya believed that people who gave their blood to the gods received divine protection, spiritual strength, and cosmic favor in return. Whether this was true or not, the belief system created a society where people were willing to endure considerable pain and risk for religious purposes. You're beginning to understand that surviving in Maya society isn't just about learning practical skills or avoiding physical dangers. It's also about accepting a worldview where the gods are real, demanding, and require constant sacrifice to maintain their support for human civilization. And you've just signed up for a lifetime of voluntary bleeding in service of cosmic order. The gods have accepted your blood offering, but they're going to want more, much more. And refusing to provide it isn't really an option if you want to survive in Maya society. Your arm hurts, your head is spinning, and you're beginning to understand that Maya religion is much more intense than you had anticipated. And the day is only half over. It's noon, and the temperature has climbed to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity levels that make breathing feel like drowning in hot air. Your bloodletting wound is throbbing. Your clothes are soaked with sweat, and you're beginning to understand why the Maya built their civilization around the assumption that simply staying alive was a full-time job. The heat isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. This is the kind of heat that kills people who don't know how to handle it. And the Maya worked in these conditions every day for their entire lives. They developed techniques for surviving extreme heat, but these techniques required knowledge and conditioning that you don't have. You're supposed to keep working through the midday heat because Maya society doesn't have the luxury of air-conditioned break rooms or flexible work schedules. The agricultural cycles, religious ceremonies, and construction projects all operate according to schedules that don't pause for weather conditions. If you can't work in the heat, you can't work at all. The Maya workers around you are still functioning, but they're clearly struggling. They move more slowly, take frequent but brief rests in whatever shade they can find, and drink water in small, careful sips that suggest they understand the critical importance of hydration management. They've learned to pace themselves for survival rather than efficiency. You haven't learned any of these techniques. You're working at the same pace you used in the morning, drinking water too quickly when you can get it, and not recognizing the early signs of heat exhaustion. Your body temperature is rising, your heart is racing, and you're beginning to feel dizzy and nauseous. The shade, when you can find it, provides minimal relief. The jungle canopy blocks some direct sunlight, but it also traps heat and humidity at ground level. It's like working inside a green, living sauna that's designed to test the limits of human endurance. The air is so thick with moisture that sweat doesn't evaporate efficiently, which means your body's natural cooling system isn't working properly. You're assigned to carry heavy clay pots filled with water from the cenote to the construction site where workers are building a new temple. The pots weigh about 40 pounds each when full, and the path between the cenote and the construction site is rough, uneven, and completely exposed to the sun. The Maya water carriers make this journey look routine, but they're using techniques that you don't understand. They walk with a specific rhythm that conserves energy. They position the pots on their bodies in ways that distribute weight efficiently, and they rest at specific intervals that prevent overheating without wasting too much time. You're just trying to carry the water as fast as possible, which is exactly the wrong approach. You're burning energy too quickly, overheating your body, and making mistakes that waste both time and water. Halfway to the construction site, you're struggling to stay upright, and the Maya carriers are beginning to look at you with concern. The construction site is a hellscape of stone, dust, and blazing sun. Workers are moving massive limestone blocks, mixing mortar and carving decorative elements while the sun beats down mercilessly. The stone surfaces are too hot to touch with bare skin, and the dust from stone cutting fills the air with particles that make breathing even more difficult. The Maya construction workers have developed techniques for handling hot stone, but these techniques require calloused hands, proper timing, and knowledge of how different materials respond to heat. They know when stone is too hot to work with safely, how to position themselves to minimize sun exposure, and how to recognize the signs of heat-related illness in themselves and their co-workers. You don't know any of this. You try to help move a limestone block and immediately burn your hands on the superheated stone. The pain is intense and immediate, and you drop your end of the block, which could have injured the other workers or damaged the stone itself. The Maya workers quickly take over, using thick leather wrappings to protect their hands from the hot stone. The temple construction is incredibly demanding, even under normal conditions, but working in extreme heat makes every task exponentially more difficult. The workers have to coordinate their movements carefully, communicate efficiently, and maintain the kind of precision that's required for monumental architecture, while dealing with heat that would incapacitate most modern people. You're beginning to understand why Maya construction projects took decades to complete. It wasn't just because the work was complex. It was because the working conditions were so extreme that progress was necessarily slow. The Maya built incredible monuments, but they did it while fighting against environmental conditions that were actively trying to kill them. The heat is also affecting your judgment and coordination. You're making mistakes that you wouldn't make under normal conditions, dropping tools, misunderstanding instructions, and generally functioning at a much lower level than your normal capabilities. Heat exhaustion affects cognitive function as well as physical performance. Around mid-afternoon, you start to notice that the jungle's sounds have changed. The birds are quieter, the insects are less active, and there's a tension in the air that suggests the presence of something large and dangerous. The Maya workers immediately become more alert, scanning the jungle edges and positioning themselves closer to the tools that could serve as weapons. One of the workers points to a tree about 50 yards away, and you see what has everyone concerned. There are scratch marks on the bark, about 8 feet off the ground, made by claws that are clearly much larger than anything you want to encounter. The scratches are fresh, which means whatever made them is still in the area. The Maya have a healthy respect for jaguars, and for good reason. Jaguars are apex predators that can kill humans easily and silently. They're excellent climbers, powerful swimmers, and skilled hunters that can take down prey much larger than themselves. In Maya society, jaguars are both feared and revered, considered sacred animals that embody the power of the gods. The workers continue their tasks, but they're now working with weapons within easy reach and constantly scanning their surroundings for signs of danger. The Maya developed techniques for working in jaguar territory, but these techniques require constant vigilance and the ability to respond quickly to threats. You, on the other hand, are too exhausted and overheated to maintain proper awareness of your surroundings. You're focused on just getting through the next few minutes of work, not on watching for predators that could attack without warning. This kind of reduced awareness is exactly what makes people vulnerable to jaguar attacks. The temple you're helping to build has jaguar skulls mounted on the walls, and these aren't just decorative elements. They're reminders of the constant presence of danger in Maya society, warnings to workers that they're operating in an environment where predators are always a threat. The skulls are also spiritual protection, meant to invoke the power of the jaguar gods to protect the workers from actual jaguars. The jaguar skulls are positioned to face outward from the temple, watching the jungle for threats and supposedly deterring other jaguars from approaching the construction site. Whether this actually works or not, the psychological effect is important. The workers feel like they have some protection from supernatural forces, even if they have to rely on their own skills and vigilance for practical protection. As the afternoon heat reaches its peak, several workers begin showing signs of serious heat exhaustion. One man becomes dizzy and has to sit down in the shade. Another worker starts vomiting, which is a sign of heat stroke that can be fatal if not treated immediately. The Maya supervisors quickly organize cooling measures and water distribution to prevent anyone from dying of heat-related illness. You're also beginning to feel the effects of prolonged heat exposure. Your vision is becoming blurry. Your coordination is deteriorating, and you're having trouble concentrating on even simple tasks. The Maya workers around you recognize these symptoms and try to help by giving you water and positioning you in whatever shade is available. The Maya understood that heat-related illness was a serious threat to their workforce, and they developed techniques for preventing and treating these conditions. They knew the importance of gradual heat acclimatization, proper hydration, and recognizing the early signs of heat exhaustion. They also understood that some people were more susceptible to heat illness than others, but their techniques for dealing with heat were based on lifelong conditioning and cultural knowledge that you don't possess. They started working in these conditions as children, gradually building up tolerance and learning the skills necessary for survival. You're trying to adapt to extreme heat in a matter of hours, which is essentially impossible. The midday heat is relentless, dangerous, and inescapable. The Maya worked in these conditions because they had to, not because they enjoyed it or found it easy. They built one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas, while fighting a daily battle against environmental conditions that were actively trying to kill them. You're beginning to understand that Maya civilization wasn't just impressive because of what they accomplished. It was impressive because they accomplished it while dealing with challenges that would defeat most modern people. The heat, the humidity, the predators, and the constant physical demands created a society where only the strongest, most adaptable people could survive. And you're rapidly discovering that you might not be one of them. The heat is overwhelming, the work is brutal, and the constant threat of predators means that even brief moments of rest require vigilant attention to your surroundings. You're exhausted, overheated, and beginning to understand why Maya society was organized around the assumption that survival was never guaranteed. You're still struggling with the heat and trying to recover from your bloodletting ceremony when a runner appears at the construction site, breathing hard and speaking rapidly in Maya to the supervisors. You don't understand the words, but you understand the immediate change in atmosphere. Everyone stops working, tools are set down quietly, and people start looking toward the jungle, with the kind of alert tension that suggests mortal danger. The runner is reporting enemy scouts spotted near the main trade road, about 2 miles from the city. In Maya society, this isn't just concerning news, it's a potential death sentence for everyone in the area. Maya warfare was brutal, efficient, and focused on capturing prisoners for sacrifice rather than simply defeating enemies. Being captured by enemy warriors meant being dragged back to their city for ceremonial execution in front of cheering crowds. The supervisors quickly organize the workers into defensive positions, but you immediately realize that you don't know what you're supposed to do. The Maya workers automatically fall into formations that they've clearly practiced many times. They know where to position themselves, which tools can serve as weapons, and how to create defensive arrangements that maximize their chances of survival. You, on the other hand, are standing around looking confused while everyone else prepares for potential combat. This isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. In Maya warfare, people who can't fight effectively are liabilities that endanger everyone else. Weak fighters get captured, and captured fighters get tortured for information about their city's defenses. The Maya approach to warfare was fundamentally different from what you might expect. They weren't trying to kill as many enemies as possible. They were trying to capture high-value prisoners who could be sacrificed to the gods. This meant that Maya warriors were trained to disable and capture, rather than simply kill. But it also meant that being wounded or overwhelmed in battle often led to a fate worse than death. Maya cities were in constant competition with each other for resources, territory, and prestige. Warfare was a regular occurrence, not an exceptional crisis. Every Maya city maintained trained warriors, developed defensive strategies, and prepared for the possibility of attack. The city you're in has probably been attacked multiple times in the past, and it will probably be attacked again in the future. The weapons available to Maya warriors were sophisticated but limited by the technology of the time. They had no metal weapons, no gunpowder, no horses. Their arsenal consisted of obsidian-tipped spears, wooden clubs embedded with sharp stones, and atlatls, spear throwers, that could propel projectiles with deadly accuracy. These weapons were effective, but they required skill and strength to use properly. You're handed a wooden club that weighs about 5 pounds and has pieces of sharp obsidian embedded along its edges. The club is designed to incapacitate rather than kill, allowing warriors to capture prisoners rather than simply eliminating threats. The obsidian edges are sharper than steel, but they're also brittle and can break if used incorrectly. The Maya warrior showing you the club demonstrates the proper grip and swing technique. The club isn't meant to be swung like a baseball bat. It's designed for controlled, precise strikes that can disable opponents without killing them. The obsidian edges can cause serious bleeding, but the goal is to wound enemies enough to capture them, not to cause immediately fatal injuries. You try to practice the club techniques, but it's immediately obvious that you don't have the strength, coordination, or experience to use this weapon effectively. The Maya warrior next to you can swing the club with precision and power, striking specific targets with controlled force. You're just swinging randomly and hoping to hit something. The Maya also used psychological warfare extensively. They decorated their weapons, shields, and armor with images designed to intimidate enemies and invoke the protection of war gods. Warriors wore elaborate headdresses that made them look larger and more threatening. They painted their faces and bodies with designs that were meant to channel divine power and terrify opponents. Your plain cotton clothing and unmarked skin make you look like exactly what you are: a helpless civilian who has no business being in a combat situation. The Maya warriors around you look like supernatural beings designed for battle. Their appearance is calculated to inspire fear in enemies and confidence in allies. You look like someone who should be hiding behind the warriors, not standing next to them. The city's defense system is sophisticated, but relies on community participation that you don't understand. The Maya had developed strategies for defending against attacks, but these strategies required everyone to know their role and execute it properly. There were signals for different types of threats, procedures for evacuating civilians, and protocols for coordinating defensive actions. You don't know any of these procedures. When the warning signals are given, you don't know what they mean. When people start moving to defensive positions, you don't know where you're supposed to go. When weapons are distributed, you don't know which ones you're qualified to use. You're a liability in a situation where everyone needs to contribute to the common defense. The Maya warrior culture was built around the concept of capturing enemies for sacrifice. But this didn't mean that Maya warfare was less deadly than other forms of combat. Warriors who couldn't capture prisoners were often captured themselves. Cities that couldn't defend themselves were conquered, and their populations enslaved or sacrificed. The stakes were literally life and death for everyone involved. Maya warfare also involved complex political calculations that you don't understand. Different cities formed alliances that could change based on political circumstances, trade relationships, and religious obligations. Today's ally could be tomorrow's enemy, and the reasons for these changes were often subtle and based on cultural factors that were opaque to outsiders. The scouts report that the enemy force appears to be a raiding party rather than a full invasion army. This is both good and bad news. Good, because a raiding party is smaller and less likely to capture the entire city. Bad, because raiding parties are specifically designed to capture prisoners, and they're often more motivated and aggressive than larger armies. Maya raiding parties were elite units that specialized in quick strikes, prisoner capture, and rapid retreat. They were typically composed of experienced warriors who knew the local terrain and could move quickly through jungle conditions. They were also skilled at identifying high-value targets, people whose capture would bring prestige and favor from the gods. The Maya believed that capturing enemy nobles, priests, or skilled craftsmen was particularly valuable because these prisoners could provide important information about enemy capabilities, and because their sacrifice would be especially pleasing to the gods. This meant that anyone who looked important, skilled, or valuable was a priority target for enemy raiders. You're beginning to understand that your obvious incompetence and foreign appearance might actually make you a more attractive target for enemy warriors. Capturing a strange-looking foreigner would be unusual and potentially valuable. Enemy priests might be very interested in sacrificing someone from outside Maya culture, especially if they thought it might provide special favor from the gods. The defensive preparations continue throughout the afternoon, but the enemy scouts don't materialize into a full attack. This is typical of Maya warfare. There were often periods of tension and preparation that didn't result in actual combat. But the possibility of attack was always present, and the Maya had to be ready to respond quickly when threats appeared. The Maya warriors remain alert and armed throughout the day, but they also continue working on essential tasks. Maya society couldn't shut down completely every time there was a threat of attack, because threats were constant and work had to continue. The Maya developed techniques for maintaining productivity while staying ready for combat. You, on the other hand, are exhausted by the constant state of alert. The psychological stress of knowing that enemy warriors might attack at any moment is overwhelming, especially when you know that you're not prepared to defend yourself effectively. The Maya warriors around you seem to handle this stress easily, but they've been living with it their entire lives. The Maya also used warfare as a way of obtaining resources that weren't available through trade. Enemy cities might have access to different materials, different technologies, or different agricultural products. Successful warfare could bring these resources back to the victorious city, improving the quality of life for its inhabitants. But warfare was also expensive and dangerous. Maya cities had to maintain trained warriors, produce weapons and armor, and develop defensive infrastructure. Cities that were too aggressive might provoke alliances against them. Cities that were too passive might be seen as weak and become targets for more aggressive neighbors. The balance between military strength and diplomatic relationships was delicate and constantly changing. Maya rulers had to be skilled, not just in warfare, but in the political calculations that determined when to fight, when to negotiate, and when to form alliances. These decisions affected the survival of entire populations. As the day progresses without an attack, the tension gradually decreases, but it doesn't disappear entirely. The Maya warriors remain armed and alert, ready to respond quickly if the situation changes. The scouts continue to monitor the surrounding area, and the city's defenses remain activated. You're beginning to understand that this state of constant readiness is normal in Maya society. The threat of warfare is always present, and the Maya have organized their entire civilization around the assumption that they might need to fight for their survival at any moment. The Maya built incredible cities, developed sophisticated technologies, and created complex political systems while living under the constant threat of violent attack. They accomplished remarkable things while knowing that everything they built could be destroyed by enemies who were always watching, always planning, and always ready to strike. Your day of potential warfare is ending without actual combat, but the experience has taught you something important about Maya society. The Maya lived with a level of constant danger and uncertainty that would be overwhelming for most modern people. They built their civilization not in spite of this danger, but because of their ability to function effectively despite it. And you're beginning to understand that you probably don't have what it takes to live with this level of constant threat. The Maya warriors around you make it look easy, but they've been preparing for this their entire lives. You're just trying to survive until sunset, and you're starting to doubt whether you'll make it that long. As the sun begins to set, you think you might finally get some relief from the brutal heat and constant danger. But in Maya society, sunset isn't the end of the workday. It's the beginning of the most important and terrifying part of the day. The evening temple ceremony is about to begin, and you're about to discover that Maya religion gets much more intense after dark. The temple complex comes alive with activity as hundreds of people gather for the evening ritual. Torches are lit throughout the area, creating flickering pools of light that dance across the stone walls and cast moving shadows that make the carved gods look like they're breathing. The air fills with the smoke of copal incense, which burns with a sweet, heavy smell that's both intoxicating and slightly nauseating. The sound of drums begins in the distance, a deep, rhythmic pounding that seems to come from the earth itself. The Maya use drums made from hollowed-out logs covered with animal skins, and the sound carries for miles through the jungle. The drumming isn't just music. It's a call to the gods, a way of announcing that humans are ready to communicate with the divine world. You're swept along with the crowd of people moving toward the main temple, a massive pyramid that rises about 100 feet into the darkening sky. The temple is covered with carved stone decorations that look menacing in the flickering torchlight. Serpent heads with open mouths line the stairs, and the walls are covered with images of gods, sacrificial victims, and cosmic battles between forces of light and darkness. The crowd gathering around the temple includes people from all levels of Maya society, but they're arranged in strict hierarchical order. The nobles stand closest to the temple, wearing their finest clothing and most elaborate jewelry. The commoners stand farther back, organized by occupation and social status. You're pushed toward the back of the crowd, where the poorest people stand and watch the ceremony from a distance. The priests begin to appear at the top of the temple, wearing elaborate headdresses made from colorful feathers and carrying ceremonial objects that catch the torchlight. The priests are the intermediaries between the human and divine worlds, and they're responsible for ensuring that the evening ceremony is performed correctly. A mistake in the ritual could anger the gods and bring disaster to the entire city. The head priest is wearing a costume that makes him look like a god himself. His headdress is made from quetzal feathers, jade ornaments, and gold decorations that must weigh 40 pounds. His face is painted with intricate designs in bright colors, and his body is covered with ritual tattoos that tell the story of his religious training and spiritual achievements. The ceremony begins with chanting that echoes across the temple complex. The priests are reciting prayers in ancient Maya language, calling on the gods to accept the evening offerings and continue their protection of the city. The chanting is haunting and otherworldly, unlike anything you've ever heard. It's supposed to be beautiful, but it's also terrifying in its intensity and otherworldly quality. The crowd joins in the chanting at specific points, creating a massive chorus of voices that seems to shake the very stones of the temple. You don't know the words, but you try to move your mouth in time with the others. Not participating in the chanting would mark you as someone who doesn't belong, and that's extremely dangerous during religious ceremonies. The priests begin to make offerings to the gods, starting with bundles of copal incense that are thrown into large braziers. The incense burns with bright flames and thick smoke that rises toward the sky, carrying the prayers of the people to the divine realm. The smoke is so thick that it's difficult to see clearly, and the flickering flames create an atmosphere that's both mystical and threatening. Next come the food offerings: corn, beans, fruits, and specially prepared dishes that represent the finest products of Maya agriculture. These offerings are arranged on stone altars and blessed by the priests before being symbolically fed to the gods. The Maya believe that the gods need food to maintain their strength, just like humans, and that feeding the gods properly is essential for maintaining their support. But everyone in the crowd knows that the real offering is still to come. The drums are getting louder, the chanting is becoming more intense, and the priests are beginning to prepare the altar for the most important part of the ceremony. Human sacrifice is the ultimate offering to the gods, and tonight someone is going to die to ensure that the sun rises tomorrow. The Maya believed that human sacrifice was necessary to keep the universe functioning properly. The gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world and human beings, so humans were obligated to sacrifice themselves to keep the gods strong. This wasn't just religious belief, it was cosmic necessity. Without regular human sacrifice, the gods would weaken and die, and the world would end. The victim is brought forward by temple guards, and you immediately understand why human sacrifice was so terrifying for everyone in Maya society. The victim is someone who looks just like you, a young adult who's been selected for reasons that aren't entirely clear. They might have been a prisoner of war, a criminal, or simply someone who was chosen by the priests as an appropriate offering. The victim is dressed in fine clothing and elaborate decorations, because the Maya believed that the gods deserved beautiful offerings. But underneath the ceremonial costume, the victim is clearly terrified. They're walking steadily toward the altar, but their face shows the kind of fear that comes from knowing exactly what's about to happen. The crowd watches in complete silence as the victim is positioned on the sacrificial altar. The altar is a stone table at the top of the temple, positioned so that everyone in the crowd can see what's happening. The Maya designed their temples to make human sacrifice as visible as possible, because witnessing sacrifice was considered an important religious obligation. The head priest raises a ceremonial knife made from obsidian, which is sharper than any metal blade. The knife is beautifully crafted, with a handle decorated with jade and gold, but its purpose is purely functional. Obsidian knives are perfect for cutting through human flesh and bone. The actual sacrifice happens quickly, but the image is burned into your memory forever. The Maya believed that the victim's soul would travel to the divine realm, where it would serve the gods and help maintain cosmic order. The sacrifice was seen as a transformation rather than a death, but the physical reality was still shocking and terrifying. The Maya around you seem to view the sacrifice as a normal and necessary part of religious life, but for you, it's the most horrific thing you've ever seen. The casual efficiency of the killing, the religious celebration of death, and the matter-of-fact acceptance of human sacrifice are unlike anything in your experience. But the ceremony isn't over yet. The priests continue with additional rituals, including the burning of more incense, the recitation of more prayers, and the distribution of blessed food to the crowd. The human sacrifice was the climax of the ceremony, but it was just one part of a complex religious ritual that continues for hours. The Maya believed that the evening ceremony was one of the most important events in their religious calendar. It was a time when the barrier between the human and divine worlds was thinnest, when the gods were most likely to listen to human prayers and most willing to accept human offerings. Participating in the ceremony was both a religious obligation and a way of ensuring divine protection for the coming day. You're beginning to understand that Maya religion isn't just about personal belief or spiritual comfort. It's about maintaining cosmic order through human action, and that action sometimes requires the ultimate sacrifice. The Maya built their entire civilization around the belief that human sacrifice was necessary for the survival of the world. The ceremony continues with more chanting, more offerings, and more prayers. The priests perform elaborate dances that tell the stories of the gods and reenact the cosmic battles that determine the fate of the world. The crowd participates by responding to the chanting and by making their own offerings of food, blood, and precious objects. As the ceremony reaches its conclusion, the priests announce that the gods have accepted the evening offerings and will continue their protection of the city. The crowd responds with relief and gratitude, knowing that they've fulfilled their religious obligations and earned divine favor for another day. But you're also beginning to understand that tomorrow there will be another ceremony, another offering, and quite possibly another human sacrifice. The Maya religious calendar includes numerous occasions that require human sacrifice, and the cycle of death and offering continues throughout the year. The evening ceremony is ending, but the memory of what you've witnessed will stay with you forever. You've seen the most extreme expression of Maya religious belief, and you've learned that survival in Maya society requires accepting a worldview where human sacrifice is not only acceptable, but necessary. The Maya created one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas, but they did it while believing that the gods required regular human sacrifice to keep the world functioning. Tonight, you've witnessed the reality of that belief, and you've learned that Maya religion is much more demanding and terrifying than you had imagined. The torches are beginning to burn low. The crowd is dispersing, and the temple complex is returning to its normal nighttime quiet. You've survived the evening ceremony, but you've also learned that in Maya society, survival sometimes requires witnessing things that will change you forever. The Maya lived with the constant knowledge that human sacrifice was a regular part of their religious life, and they built their entire civilization around the acceptance of this practice. Tomorrow there will be another day, another ceremony, and another opportunity for the gods to demand the ultimate sacrifice from their human servants. And you're beginning to understand that in Maya society, that sacrifice could be anyone, including you. So there you have it. One day in Maya civilization, and you probably wouldn't have made it past breakfast. You woke up in sweltering heat with insects treating you like a buffet. You tried to get clean with ash and water that had been used by dozens of other people. You ate corn 3 times with maybe some beans if you were lucky. You failed at basic agricultural work that Maya children could do blindfolded. You offended multiple gods through your incompetence and had your arm pierced with thorns to feed blood to cosmic forces. You nearly died of heat exhaustion while carrying water in conditions that would hospitalize most modern people. You discovered that even lighting fires or planting seeds required religious knowledge that took years to master. You witnessed human sacrifice performed with casual efficiency, understanding that this wasn't considered barbaric. It was considered necessary for keeping the world functioning. You survived one day, barely, in a civilization that lasted over 1,000 years. The Maya weren't just surviving in these conditions, they were thriving. While you struggled with basic tasks like staying hydrated and avoiding religious mistakes, they were building massive cities, developing sophisticated mathematical systems, creating complex calendars, and conducting astronomical observations more accurate than anything Europeans would achieve for centuries. They built pyramids that still stand today without metal tools or wheeled vehicles. They developed writing systems that recorded their history. They created art demonstrating cultural sophistication that rivals any civilization in human history. All of this while living in conditions that would defeat most modern people within hours. The Maya calculated planetary movements with extraordinary precision. They developed mathematical concepts Europeans wouldn't discover for centuries. They created architectural marvels requiring engineering skills and organizational abilities that rival anything in the modern world. But they also bled themselves regularly to feed their gods. They threw people off pyramids to ensure good harvests. They lived in constant fear of cosmic disasters that could only be prevented through proper religious observance and regular human sacrifice. The Maya were brilliant, sophisticated, and capable of remarkable achievements while operating according to a worldview completely alien to most modern people. You spent one day trying to survive in their world and barely made it through basic requirements of Maya daily life. The Maya spent over 1,000 years not just surviving, but creating one of the most advanced civilizations in human history. They accomplished this without modern technology, medicine, or agriculture. They did it while living in conditions considered extreme hardship by contemporary standards, maintaining religious and social systems that required constant attention and regular sacrifice. The Maya turned one of the most challenging environments on Earth into the foundation for sophisticated civilization. They built pyramids that scrape the sky, predicted eclipses with perfect accuracy, and created art that still moves people to tears. But they also accepted that gods needed human blood to maintain cosmic order, organizing their entire civilization around keeping those gods properly fed. You wouldn't last a day in Maya civilization, but somehow they made it work for over a millennium. That's the difference between surviving and thriving, between adapting to your environment and mastering it completely. The Maya didn't just survive, they transformed their world into the foundation for one of history's most remarkable civilizations.